We're back. Football's back. We're here at the Kroger Field Central Bank press box. He's Adam Luckett. I'm Nick Roush. And football season officially kicked off today because Mark Stoops, he did his media days press conference a little bit ahead of the media days, a little bit off schedule. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And also had the Lexington kickoff luncheon. Luckett, how was your lunch?
It was fine. We got to enjoy it with you. No silverware. But we don't need silverware around these parts.
No.
Straight up Fred Flintstone here, baby.
It really was just grabbing it.
It was a blue collar lunch.
It was the blue collar lunch, eating mashed potatoes with my bare hands. But no, it was a good time. We got to hear a lot from Mark Stoops. 45 minutes. I mean, I kind of looked down and was like, he's still talking, which made me happy because there was a part of me going into this where I was a little worried about what was going to happen. There's been some friction between Mark and local media, and by local media, I mean me and Luckett.
And I was worried if the Coke can was going to be up there. I thought he might throw it at your big head. I was a little worried.
So I was wondering what's this going to be like, but instead of getting cagey Mark with a lot of friction, he kind of acknowledged some of that stuff, but really was just there to talk ball, which I think if we have any grievance with Stoops, it's his unwillingness to just talk ball sometimes. And today he actually played ball and talked about it with us.
I think a lot of it was get it out now and then get quiet in the season, right?
Yeah.
Or in camp. I think that'll probably play out. But I did sense, at least this I think he was pushing, was just excitement for this team in this year, in this kind of reset we're seeing them go through. We keep hearing them saying the team, bring it. We're going to come out swinging. Talk in general, just about how tough the schedule is. But you did sense, I think, some excitement from him to get out and see what they can do. They have a lot to prove. I think this offseason has gone exactly how they wanted it to go. Interesting point from him, Nick, early in the press conference was that it's been a great offseason. It's been very quiet. Like that is exactly what they wanted. That has been, I think that's been their direct approach. Now they've denied it, saying that he did unasked.
It was very funny because he said it's been a very quiet offseason. I didn't do anything different though. It's like, wait, hold up. Can it be both things? Which whatever.
Yeah, said they did a little self-study, make sure they weren't like skipping out on media ops. But that's not what we were trying to get to, though. I don't think
the point was the messaging,
yes,
exactly, like the actual. Is this team going to be good at football? And today was our first sign that there is some confidence, some reasons to believe in this team. And some of it is purely size. They got some big old boys in there. Stoops hit it home that 100% participation. They had a freshman show up late one day. They nipped that in the bud. He really hit hard on the strength and conditioning staff to get bigger, faster, stronger. And look, I know that is cliche. Bigger, faster, stronger. They're in the best shape ever. Da-da-da-da-da. But if you look up front in the trenches, and they want to be a program where the big men lead away, they got some big boys. They really like Jalen Farmer. Shields Pete is a giant amongst other giants, and he still looks enormous. Jagger Burton is as big as he's ever been here. Bush Hamden said at the luncheon that this is an offensive line that's going to remind you of some of these offensive lines of old. That combined with some of this talk about the defensive line too, David Gusta in the trenches, they're really howling. It seems like what we speculated for a long time, that this is going to be a team that gets back to playing hard-nosed physical football. The signs were always there, and we got more confirmation of that today.
Yeah, I think obviously that's the plan. I think to your first point there, the strength and conditioning got to get bigger, faster, stronger. Stoops said he challenged the strength staff here in Lexington to really get dialed in. We got to do all these things. Yada, yada, yada. But you heard him directly say there was a freshman, missed a lift, and then the players, they have like kind of groups, and the players got him back on that. That goes to the player accountability piece, which was kind of a huge talking point at the end of last year. There was a lack of maybe accountability in that building, and that, to me, I think some people read that quote and say, oh, wow, great job, Mark Stoops. You finally got your team to go to workouts in the summer. But I think the point of that was that everyone is pulling on the same rope and they're taking accountability of the team. Stoops said in his luncheon, we want to be player-led, but we have to give them the tools and the resources to be like their kind of leaders we want. So that, I think, that was really all of that. It's more just saying they have kind of a alignment and they're all pushing and pulling in the same direction.
Well, and another great example to that is just Stoops praising Jamarian Wilcox. where I'm certainly paraphrasing here, but this was the guy that, couldn't tie shoes, wouldn't do things the right way. He's like, when you see this guy, we know that he can run the football hard. And so when you bring in other guys, competition brings a lot out of them. And he said, Jamarion's had a quiet offseason, and that's a good thing. And he's got two guys now that seemingly are going to take his snaps if he doesn't get his stuff together. And he's gotten his stuff together. He said he's up to 200 pounds. That is another positive sign, not just for Wilcox and all of the team's overall maturity, but I think also just for, one of those three guys is going to be a good running back.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're going to be able to run the football if Wilcox, Dowdell, and McGowan, one of those three, you're going to be batting 300 and getting into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, right? Like, that's at least one of those guys is going to work out. You should be able to be a team that can run the damn ball.
And we also heard a question I get a lot is like, who is even on this team? Like, who are our best players? Adam, what are this? What can we expect from this, that? You finally heard them, I think, open up on players. Like Seth McGowan, they keep gushing about him. Mm-hmm. David Gusta, gushing about him. McQueese Humphrey Grace.
Yeah.
You kind of heard Stoops kind of gush about him. Alex Safari is a guy he's really proud of. Bush Hamden said at the luncheon, everything's going to kind of start with Kendrick Law in their passing game. And then he pointed out Dante Dowdell and kind of his physical nature. So, like, we've reported on this. He was the best short yardage back in college football last year at Nebraska. That's going to be a role for him. So you're starting to hear them a little bit open up on who could be the stars and the playmakers for this group. That's not something like you go back to spring practice, they didn't want to say anything, right? And so now they're opening up a little bit. We're starting to learn a little bit more about this team. But the more that we finally start to peel this onion back and start getting into these layers, we are betting on, we had this much chunk of money and we spent it on the offensive line. And so we're betting on that money and on the defensive linemen too. You look at some of their transfer additions, that's going to fix their problems. They felt like, to me, Nick, they had an inside-out problem. We talked about, the receivers not getting open, the quarterback, everyone loves to talk about that, but they felt like they had a line of scrimmage problem last year and a depth issue. How many times did we hear the word
hammered home?
I felt like 800 times between Atlanta and today in Lexington, I have heard about how they had defensive line injuries in the spring before the 2024 season, and that totally just destroyed their season. They just couldn't practice. They got in the year, and it reared its ugly head. They feel like they fixed that with depth. They feel like they have depth, I think, across the board. And I think when you dive into the portal strategy, it became clear, like, we feel like we have, it's not one position to fix. We got kind of like 8 positions to fix here, and we have to address it with numbers. And I feel like they have done that. Now we get to see if it plays out. Because a big question for us, I think, all offseason has been, do they just have the star power? Like, or can they win with, or the sum of the parts, or whatever that phrase goes.
Yeah.
So, like, can your depth raise you? And we're going to see. But I think that's the plan. And again, it goes back to, I think, up front, offensive line and defensive line. They're at their best when those two positions are good. When they're not good, they can be in trouble. And we'll see if they have addressed them in the right way.
One thing, and it's a good way to segue to probably the biggest point, I guess the most newsy thing that Mark Stoops said today was they invested in their portal players in the offensive line, and Stoops noted that things are more transactional now, and there's actually some good consequences to that. If it's more of a business, the players are treating it more like a business. And the maturity that the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, some of them are bringing into the program, that's what Stoops was looking for, right? Not a bunch of guys who were too cool and they were already writing checks that they aren't going to cash on Sunday but thought they were going to cash on Sunday. These guys are players who have something to prove. They got maybe another year or two left to prove it. They're getting paid well to do it, and they're treating it as such. And that's the kind of what Stoops wants to see from his players. They have a business-like sort of mentality. And that was the big headline, was the business. Like, is the business good enough to keep working? Do we have enough money in the banana stand? Because that's all people wanted to talk about a week ago, right? Matt Norlander had the report that Kentucky basketball is going to spend 45% of the revenue sharing money, which would be 3 times when any other program is expected to spend in the SEC. And Stoops got asked point blank, you going to get enough revenue sharing money to compete in the SEC? And the answer has been, for a while, yes. We're good to go, Luckett.
Yeah.
There's plenty of money in that banana stand.
I think important to point out there is a caveat there because he mentioned the cap. Everyone working with a cap. What happens if they can't enforce collectives? Then it's a soft cap, and that changes. But I did think it was interesting that he kind of said or alluded to, Nick, was like, not only they're going to have money to be competitive with their peers, but it almost made it sound like he thinks they're going to have more money than some of the other people in the league.
Yeah. Within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be in a really good position. He was kind of trying to tiptoe around it, but essentially sounded like that banana stand, they've got a lot of bananas. And like the boxes
Banana
are
tree,
stacking
they
up.
found maybe a couple banana trees.
Which, by the way, have you ever had one of those frozen bananas?
I have not.
Garbage dessert. Just don't ever try. It's not, it hurts your teeth. Like, it's really hard to chew on. Like, no wonder the Blues ran out of money because frozen bananas, not good. Anything else good from today you wanted to mention, like, before we get out of here?
Again, I think another messaging kind of phrase he's used, he said this in the luncheon, and he said this down at media days, was basically like, you're going to be proud of this football team. So what does that mean? I think that's the first question. Well, okay, he keeps saying this, so what does it mean? Again, I think it gets back to, he thinks they're going to get back to playing the blue-collar, rock'em, sock'em robot football that they were good at and that they won games at. And so I think that is what's coming. Run the football, play good defense, try to win games in the fourth quarter, and be a team that when adversity hits, they don't let go of the rope throughout the season. And so now we'll get to see if that actually plays out, but that is the plan, and I think they're entering this point. Players report on Tuesday, camp starts on Wednesday, media day Friday, and then we have fan day on Saturday, open practice. So we'll start to learn more, but that they feel good about where they're at. Now we got to see them when they get out on the grass, what can they get done.
We'll know soon enough if this is all talk or if it's the real deal, because football, it's officially back.